All right. Page 150, Chapter 9. The Modular Universe. When talking about communication on this level, we have to take into account other consciousnesses, not just the humankind that abound in our universe. As we mentioned before, we human beings are units of consciousness that make up larger consciousness, and a group of these larger consciousnesses make up an even larger unit of consciousness, and so on. In short, the material and the non-material universes are modular, just as the basic unit for the physical universe, the atom, is repeated many times to build larger and larger hierarchies. So are consciousnesses built up from larger consciousnesses. A group of atoms makes up a molecule that is the hierarchy above the atom. A group of these makes up a piece of matter, let us say a crystal, visible to the naked eye, or makes up a simple living creature, which will be a hierarchy above that of the crystal. The further we go up the hierarchies, the less the structure of the hierarchy resembles the properties of the original physical building block, the atom. Only after many, many hierarchies will the structure of the original building block, the atom, be repeated again. In this case, it will appear to a certain degree to be reflected in the solar system. An elliptical galaxy will even more closely represent a simple atom in shape. The shape of our model of the universe and the flow of matter in it resemble very much the shape of the electrical fields around a seed or an egg. The seed represents unique behavior, and this is why I chose it as a representative of the universe and its actions. Let us take a tree as an example. The seed is potentially located everywhere in the tree. Eventually, the four-dimensional space-time matrix of the tree is condensed into the seed. The vibrating molecules of the genes carrying the information about the form of the tree have somehow coded the spatial and temporal form of the tree. So that we can say that the seed carries not only the information about the shape of the tree, but also its unfoldment in time. Let me reread that again. The vibrating molecules of the genes carrying the information about the form of the tree have somehow coded the spatial and temporal form of the tree, so that we can say that the seed carries not only the information about the shape of the tree, but also its unfoldment in time, or the sequence of the different stages in its growth and their timing. The spatial coding is given by the amino acid sequence. The temporal coding may possibly be given by the relationship of the frequencies of vibration of the molecular segments with respect to each other. The seed is a unique structure because in it space-time has been condensed and stored, awaiting the proper objective time for its unfoldment. Therefore, it is the representation of the tree in an altered and higher state of consciousness. It is a tree that has moved into its subjective space-time, which time and space have lost their ordinary meaning. It is a state in which time has stopped as far as the tree is concerned. The outer objective manifestation of this state of the tree is the seed. Later, when the objective conditions become favorable, the tree will come out of its meditative, hibernating state as a seed and unfold in objective space-time as a mature tree. The seed, in other words, is a more basic structure than the tree because in its qualities it is closer to the absolute. Here we might be able to shed some light on which came first, the chicken or the egg controversy. If the egg feels lonely and wants company, the only way for it to have more eggs around is to go through the nuisance of becoming a chicken, which eventually will lay more eggs. Of course, the advantage for the egg of being a chicken is the opportunity to interact with its environment and thus evolve to a higher level of consciousness. We should therefore see in the seed-tree duality of unique function of nature. It does not matter whether it is the seed of a tree, the egg of a chicken, a human sperm, or a seaweed egg. the seed is unique because if one could penetrate its consciousness, one would find that it sees itself as a full-grown tree in spite of its confinement in a tiny shell. We will expand on this further in the next chapter. The organizing fields of life. If we take an ordinary chicken egg and very carefully make two windows, one in the top and one in the bottom of the shell, without injuring the thin membrane surrounding the contents of the egg, then, using a sensitive voltmeter with a set of silver electrodes, touch the exposed membrane at the top and the bottom of the egg, figure 49, we find a positive voltage at the top and a negative one at the bottom. For an unfertilized egg taken from the refrigerator, this voltage will be steady 2.40 millivolts. When we make two more windows in the sides of the egg facing each other and take measurements, we find no similar potential difference. This indicates that there is an electrical field present along the long axis of the egg, which then has to turn back over itself as shown. This behavior has been shown to be true in seaweed eggs, frog eggs, and seeds. A good account of the field around living organisms is given in Blueprint for Immortality by Harold Saxton Burr, professor of anatomy at Yale University. These fields seem to be penetrating and surrounding live tissue. It has also been shown that the spine of a tadpole within a frog egg lines up along the axis of this potential field in the egg. I suggest that the shape of the electrical field governing the development and the form of living beings is mirrored in the shape of our universe. Here we have another example of the form of the microscale appearing after many hierarchies of size on the macro scale. Burr calls these the organizing fields, claiming that they come first, guiding the atoms and molecules of the growing organism into its proper form. In effect, what he is saying is that an electromagnetic hologram that changes with time makes up a mold, and matter eventually fills up that mold, giving rise to a tangible body. This fits very well with the model we are developing here. It is the first work actually confirming that our matter, in this case our living bodies, is held together by a four-dimensional interference pattern. We have seen in Chapter 6 that our invisible subtle bodies can be equated with higher harmonics of the physical body. This is a reasonably good analogy, but it gives the impression that these subtle bodies originate from the physical body. Actually, the physical body is the end product, so to speak, of the subtle information fields which mold our physical body as well as all physical matter. For instance, we know that most physical diseases are psychosomatic or caused by our emotional and mental components or bodies. These bodies or fields affect the health of the physical body. The emotional and mental bodies interpenetrate the physical body and extend into the space around it. We have seen in Chapter 1, Figure 5, how interacting sounds could form a physical body, a magnified crystal in that case. We know that the sound of the Absolute contains very high energies. One can visualize physical matter as being a beat frequency, Chapter 1, Figure 7c, caused by the interaction of two such sounds having a slightly different frequency. Such an interaction would cause waves of much lower frequency and higher amplitude. This is, if you remember how we described Chapter 5, Figure 32, the visible manifest aspect of the Absolute, the physical realities. Different kinds of beings. We have said earlier that matter contains or is consciousness, and now we have to draw the inevitable conclusions from that statement. If this is the case, then our planet must be a very large being, and the sun an even larger one. Let us speculate for a while on such a possibility. What happens when we lose consciousness due to some trauma, or when we project our psyches as in the experiment with time? In the first case, we know that the bodies will take care of themselves, the heart will keep on working, breathing though shallow, will be present, the brain will produce its electrical output, etc. But otherwise, the body will not respond to normal sensory inputs. It will not move, talk, or perform any of the activities that we usually associate with a waking state of consciousness. In the deep meditative state, we discern similar symptoms. In both cases, our psyches are disassociated from our bodies. In the first case, that is, the unconscious state, consciousness wanders about aimlessly as if in a deep sleep state, or it may be on a guided tour to other realities. In the meditative state, consciousness is separated from the body, but is active on the highest levels of creation. We have to conclude, therefore, that the body has its own consciousness, which is rudimentary but intelligent enough and quite capable of operating the body independently of the psyche. It is only loosely connected to the other entity, the psyche. The consciousness is the sum total of the consciousness of the cells of our body, or the wisdom of the inner parts, as the Bible puts it. We have here, then, two entities. One is the relatively low rudimentary consciousness, which runs the body, and the other is the psyche, a higher level entity which uses the body most of the time as a focus point, but is independent of it. We can liken the body to an automobile. When the driver gets out and leaves the engine running, it will idle and function normally. But to give purposeful direction to the car, a driver or a higher consciousness is needed. If the consciousness running the body leaves it, the body dies. This principle of two consciousnesses inhabiting a body can be extended to larger bodies, those of our planet, the sun, etc. We shall then have a consciousness related to the mass of the planet. It would be a rudimentary consciousness keeping the planet in running order, that is, keeping the metabolism of the planet in operation, the atmospheric circulation, ocean currents, gas balances, inner and outer temperatures, energy fields, etc. This work is being done by smaller consciousnesses that comprise the consciousness of the planet. We have described them before as nature spirits of different sorts and sizes. The large ones delegate work to the smaller ones, and so on. The sum total of them all makes up the rudimentary consciousness of the planet. We could liken the body of the planet to that of an enormous sleeping whale whose movements are very slow except for some local shudder from time to time. On the other hand, we have the other consciousness that inhabits the planet and uses it as a temporary residence. It is an enormous consciousness, and the sum total of mankind's consciousness makes up only a fraction of this great consciousness or being. This being will guide the evolution of the human races and civilizations, will cause environmental changes to stimulate evolution in certain directions. I suggest that an equation for the rudimentary consciousness, when developed sometime in the future, will look somehow like this. Rudimentary consciousness equals constant x mass, x flux, x temperature. Constant times mass times flux times temperature. The constant may be very small, somewhat like the Planck's constant. By flux, I mean the amount of energy of all frequencies radiated by the mass. The sun, having a much larger mass and temperature, will have a much larger rudimentary consciousness controlling the processes taking place in it, and it will serve as a residence for a much larger consciousness than that of the Earth. The consciousness of the Earth and of the other planets will be contained within the sun's consciousness and comprise a part of that being. We could call this being the higher consciousness of the sun, while the first one is the higher consciousness of our planet. These enormous intelligences are beyond our comprehension. Consider for a moment the system we live in. Physical life is made possible by the energy supplied to us by the sun. Our bodies are made up of materials the planet is supplying. These bodies, temporarily animated, are borrowed from the planet, and then the materials used for the bodies are returned to the planet, while the psyche goes back to the reality that fits it best. That reality may be connected with that of our planet, the sun, the universe, or the cosmos, depending on its level of evolution. We living beings play an important role in the evolution of the rudimentary consciousness of our planet. On the whole, we are upgrading it. However, in order to live in tune with it, we have to be sensitive to its needs, the most basic of which is balance. Things that unbalance the system to a high degree cause stress in this large consciousness. By stress, in this case, we mean also emotional stress. When the imbalance becomes too great, the planet responds in its own way by natural catastrophes to return its balance. The sun regulates life on this planet both by the amount of electromagnetic radiation, which we feel as heat and light, and by the fluctuations caused in the magnetic field of the planet. Those of the ionosphere, the weather patterns, the electrostatic field of the ionosphere Earth system, and many other phenomena that until now have not been measured. The sun talks to the planets with its acoustical output, the solar wind. It would take quite a bit of imagination to visualize a consciousness that runs a galaxy, a cluster of galaxies, or finally the universe. There is such a consciousness, and we shall call it the Creator. All these consciousnesses are in communication with each other, and we could even eavesdrop on their conversations while in a high state of consciousness. The knowledge we would gain would be minimal since their topics of conversations are so far removed from ours. Summary. We have a closed universe that forms an elongated hollow torus. Encased within this torus is an inner torus of protospace. Light cannot travel through the inner torus, but our psyches can. Our psyches, which contain all our knowledge, expand periodically into that space for a very short period of time at practically infinite velocities. There, the human psyches form an interference pattern with psyches of all other consciousnesses in the universe. This interference pattern or hologram of knowledge information we can call the universal mind. The knowledge in the universal mind is open to anyone who can extend his stay there by stretching out his subjective time while there so as to gain useful information and decipher it upon his return. Matter contains is consciousness. Our planet is therefore a larger consciousness, and so is the sun. A rudimentary consciousness contained in matter and in living cells maintains the life in the body. A higher consciousness, the human psyche, inhabits that body most of the time, but is independent of it. The planet and the sun have also a permanent resident consciousness and a higher consciousness, intelligence, using it as a focus or a garage. All these consciousnesses communicate with each other and make up part of the information hologram. Communication throughout the universe is continuous and instantaneous. Upon the death of the physical body, the psyche returns to its realm, finding its proper reality band with which it naturally resonates depending on its level of evolution. Our physical bodies are formed by organizing fields. These fields are four-dimensional electromagnetic holograms which change in time. Our physical bodies are the end products and the result of the interactions of our subtle, non-physical information bodies.